NewMR Innovation with Lenny Murphy and Ray Poynter. I'm Ray Poynter, and
I'm Lenny Murphy.
that's right. If you want to take the floor, Lenny.
All right, thank you, Ray. Sorry for the awkward pause. Hi, everybody. So we're going to kind of go through two different pieces of the discussion of what is innovation. First, an overview on the idea of innovation and some examples happening today. Then Ray's going to go through the results of a recent study that he's conducted on countries and perceptions on innovation, and then we're going to look at the future and look at some of the cutting edge stuff that is coming into the market today. So the dynamics of innovation, you guys have probably seen this before, but I think it's good to put things in context. The way I think about it is predominantly within the market research space. We have played within this incremental innovation category. That is where a lot of things have come out over the next few years. The distinctive, those have been things like neuromarketing or communities, which have been fairly big changes. Radical, I'm not sure that we've seen anything that is incredibly radical within our space so far from a methodological standpoint, although I believe that we are witnessing a radical shift in the perception of the role of research. And then there's disruptive things that just change the game entirely. We've talked about those for years. Is mobile disruptive or is it incremental? Well, I think it's probably a little bit of both. Is text analytics and social media disruptive or incremental? Well, probably that's more on the disruptive side. But nothing is clearly emerged to totally disrupt the insight space yet, in my opinion. Some would probably argue even the big data would fall into that disruptive category. I would argue that it's more of a radical innovation versus a disruptive innovation today, but the potential exists to move into that disruptive category. And what all this is really driven by are two primary drivers in our category. One is price and speed. That is generally influenced by technology, by the business model being applied, or by new thinking, and like the difference between behavioral economics or emotional measurement versus more traditional cognitive models, or business impact. The service is being applied, the business need, the value creation coming through. So there's these competing dynamics that force innovation in the category, and we continue to explore what those look like from an emerging perspective. So one thing that we did prior to this is we looked at the Grit 50, and yay, the Grit report is out. Hopefully everybody saw that earlier this week and has downloaded it. And as we looked at the Grit 50, we wanted to kind of segment the companies to get a view on what were the segments of innovation in research. And how that played into brand awareness. And what we came up with was 5 basic segments. One is ubiquity. Those are the big global players, the Kantar, Nielsen, Ipsosis. They are considered innovative simply because they are centers of gravity within the research space. They do a lot. They have loud voices, and they have great brand awareness. Then there's companies that are focused on research issues, companies that are redefining how to do specific things. Afanova, for instance, in concept testing would be an example of a research issue specific company that is identified as very innovative because of the focus on that issue. Then there's the broader methodological companies, companies that are mobile, for instance, is a great example of that, or communities, companies that are playing in that category. And then the platform players, which, the Research Nows, the Survey Monkeys, the Google surveys, the Qualtrics, companies vision critical that are building large enterprise platforms that help both clients and suppliers. But then far over to the right, the companies that have that are recognized as innovative at the greatest numbers are contextual companies. And the best example of that is going to be Brain Juicer, which continues to be they continue to win the award of being considered the most innovative company in research. And it's not necessarily because their methods are that different. They're focused on research issue, et cetera, et cetera. It's because they've owned a contextual framework. And for them, it's the understanding the non-conscious drivers of human behavior through the lens of behavioral economics. Those companies that have that contextual framework are considered far more innovative than anybody else when we look at the entire population of companies mentioned within the GRIP 50. And that is a really important thing, I think, for suppliers to understand, is that from a client-side perspective, the tools can be considered innovative, and they get recognition for that. But that game-changing contextual framework that arguably may apply a different level of business impact, that's what folks really key in on. So we need to recognize that continuing to expand our thinking along those lines is important. So we talked about incremental innovation. I decided just to kind of pull together another sub-segment on what we've seen in qualitative and quantitative. And I would argue that the changes that we have seen here have consistently fallen into that incremental. They certainly have been innovative, but they've been building off of each other kind of a step-by-step. So we think about qualitative, we have the traditional model of brick and mortar facilities. That is still the dominant method in qual. And lots of companies that are providing incremental innovation in terms of the way that traditional in-person qualitative is being conducted. Schlesinger, Fieldwork, 2020, Lenny, significant market players that are incorporating incremental innovation like facial scanning, et cetera, into their offerings. Then the online qual platforms, the virtual meeting systems with additional tools added in, Civicom, iTrax, 2020, a whole plethora of others that build upon the traditional qualitative platform and paradigm and took that into online. Then we started to see a bigger shift with MROCs and social platforms, vision critical, Communispace, insights that combine a level of service combined with the tools and flexibilities that online can give them. And we've seen some plays, at least some toes in the water from companies like Google with Google+, Facebook, LinkedIn. Some of them have created variants here that do have research applications. And we're beginning now to also see the integrated platforms, companies that are combining qual and quant, surveys, focus group, MROCs, all in end-to-end solutions. Toluna, Focus Vision, Qualtrics, Vision Critical are all companies that are now bringing down the barriers between quant and qual from a technology standpoint. All incremental, certainly not disruptive, innovation within the qualitative side of the business. And we see the same model in quant. The data collection platforms, SurveyMonkey, Confirm It, Kinesis, Survey Gizmo, Focus Vision, basically very comprehensive enterprise systems that allow you to do a variety of survey-based approaches, including mobile, et cetera, et cetera. Then the integrated platforms, and that was certainly an interesting change when they started bringing in sample. So you could reach out to consumers and conduct the research all within one system. Toluna, Instantly, Google Surveys, Research Now, Macromill, Vision Critical. What we're beginning to see is what may emerge into a disruptive category are the IP enablers. And these are companies like ZappyStore and Qualtrics that are building, Macromill plays in this category as well, that are building marketplaces that allow other companies to put in their IP. So an example for ZappyStore would be Miller Brown coming in and putting their link test into ZappyStore. Very interesting, primarily because they're disrupting the value chain from a cost and speed perspective. Where a traditional link test Miller Brown may cost, I don't know, 30 grand and take 3 weeks. I don't know if those are the right numbers, but they're probably about right. With the IP enablers, they're saying, let's do this in a very scaled down templated model, and it's going to cost $3,500 and you're going to get it back in 48 hours. Certainly disruptive from a business model perspective, although still incremental in terms of how they're utilizing the technology. The next evolution will be pure marketplace platforms like Pure Profile, Cool Tool, I think that we absolutely may see companies like Salesforce, Facebook, Alibaba, Amazon playing in here. Amazon actually already does have an offering there through Mechanical Turk. I recently found out that Mechanical Turk does have specific research capabilities, and you can conduct focus groups and surveys through Mechanical Turk, all within the Amazon Enterprise Cloud system. Further on down the road, the big enterprise tech companies, I think, will begin to make plays. There's been rumors for a while that Microsoft is going to make a play for Qualtrics. Of course, Google has already emerged. IBM is playing in this category. So, those will change both the dynamics of the technology as well as the business models associated with these platforms, and will be considered innovative from those perspectives, even though the methods themselves might not change. So grid is out, and we always ask for the emerging methods adoption. So here's some of the latest data on that. Mobile surveys have certainly reached critical mass. That actually happened last year. We continue to see growth. Online communities, social media analytics, mobile qual, big players. What's really interesting here is that big data, which again does have the potential to be disruptive. From a supplier side, not seeing much adoption, far greater adoption on the client side, which I think makes sense in terms of the offering, but it does tell me that there may be a disconnect in the research community between what is truly innovative and what is not. We continue to focus more on innovation around specific methods. Some of the things that have not taken significant hold yet, gamification is growing but hasn't reached its potential. Hopefully that'll change soon. Neuromarketing, Internet of Things, biometric response, wearables, still very much in the niche area, although I think that they have the potential to be incredibly disruptive and innovative as we go forward. And we see a little bit of this disconnect happen when we ask a question in GRIT on challenges and opportunities. So the biggest challenge that people say is technology. Researchers don't know exactly how to do this. And then we ask, what's the greatest opportunity? And they say methodology. Well, the methodology will primarily be driven by technology. So as an industry, we have to get comfortable with the idea that we're going to see rapid, I would say even constant, incremental and potentially disruptive innovation driven by technology, that we have to think through how we can appropriately combine the thinking around that and deploy that to provide business impact. So that's kind of the setup overall. Ray, why don't you talk about what you saw in the study that you conducted?
Thanks, Lenny. And it kind of links quite nicely in that one of the factors right at the top of the Grit Innovative 50 is that most of them are not from North America, which caught my eye at the time. If you go from about 15 downwards, lots and lots of North American companies. But at the top end, it's not just Brain Juicer, but also Canadian companies like VC, Belgium, Netherlands in terms of insights. It's also some of the big companies like Ipsos's. And that caught my eye. And I was one of the things that caused this study. Now, it's a small study. It's 126 people. And I described the sample as vaguely representative of the NewMR community. So we can't say it provides answers, but it provides some very interesting questions. I'm going to report it more fully soon. And I'm also going to do something that I almost never do, which is talk about the sample. We've got 126 people. They come from a wide range of regions. We've got 9 people in APAC, 9 countries in APAC covered, 5 in the Americas, 16 in EMEA. When we look at that data, the majority of it, 80 out of 126, coming from English-speaking countries. So there's a bit of a bias in there. It's actually slightly less of a bias than you think it might be, because if we look at where the market research industry dollars are spent, it should be 68 versus 58. So yes, it's overrepresented on the English-speaking community because it's NewMR, the survey was in English, the people who follow things like Green Book and NewMR are English readers, even if they're not English speakers. So we've got a little bit of a bias in there. And one of the questions was, which of these countries do you think are the leaders? Now, these are the 10 largest market research markets in the world. That's why we chose them. And we said, which of these do you think are the leaders in tech innovation? And I don't think it's surprising that the USA came out top because it is the biggest market. It's a third of the world's market. It produces so many great tech innovations. I was surprised to see the UK so far ahead of everybody else. And I looked at that and I said, that looks like sample bias. I think we've got too many English speakers. So I plotted the data for the people who are from the non-English speaking countries. And actually, it's almost identical. The USA goes a little bit higher. If you take the Canadians out of the sample, Canada does a little bit better, which sort of plays well with how polite the Canadians are. But actually, the data is almost the same. Globally, this community see the USA as being the driving force, the UK is running second, and everybody else nowhere. That is potentially an issue for companies trying to break through in this space. The next question was about new thinking, because there is a real debate about innovation. How much of it is technology and how much of it is new thinking about the brain, new decision making, new models, game playing theory, all of these things which are not technology. The pattern was almost the same. Now the UK comes ahead, followed by the USA, followed by this really long tail of countries a long, long way behind. So quite a worrying picture. What happens when we take the English speakers out? We get a very, very similar picture. This is why it matters to me. The next question was, okay, who produces the best research? And I have to say, as somebody who has bought and delivered research around the world over the years, that is not remotely true. The research coming out of Germany, Austria, Australia, most of these other countries is every bit as good as the research coming out of USA and UK. But there is a perception because of so many speakers coming from the UK and USA, and this was an earlier part of the research, we saw how many people from those countries were speaking at conferences. Because of the perception of innovation, the likes of Tom DeRuyck and John Kieran from Brain Juicer presenting, we're seeing this pattern of it being associated with the English language, of being driven forwards. And that is having an implication for where are people looking to put their investments? Where is it becoming easier to break through? We have this pattern. Again, if we take the English speakers out of the picture, we have almost the same picture. So there's no data in that red column from people from the USA or from the UK, and they have this perception, which I am telling you is frankly wrong, but perception is reality. That is where people put their investment and their dollars based on perceptions, not on reality, not on Ray's reality anyway. Raises some very interesting questions. Yes, there were other countries mentioned. Only the top 10 in the world were on the list to make the drop-down list nice and short. The Netherlands and Belgium were put in as type-ins. The Scandinavian countries, particularly Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, much less so Finland, were typed in as open ends. Some people said it's about people and companies, not countries. Very fair comment. And of course, the large companies, the TNSs, you don't think of them as being necessarily from a country. They're global and international. So what? I would love Lenny to pick this up and put it into the next grid. So we have a bigger picture, a more global picture, and we have some non-English speaking people in that sample then as well. Refining the questions to make them a little sharper, not limiting it to the top 10 countries. But what we are seeing is the USA, UK strength in producing papers, journals, magazines, events. So the largest innovation event in the world is taking place next week, is it, Lenny, in Atlanta with IIX?
It is indeed, Ray, yes.
Absolutely. And the big gatherings are around the world. The biggest ones tend to be, with the exception of research and results in Germany, are the SMR events, predominantly English speaking, the UK's MRS, several events in North America. And this is creating a bit of a power play for people working with innovation in those languages. This creates some real challenges, I think, for other countries. I think that they are missing a trick in terms of talking about the specialness, about what they can bring to it from their heritage, from the culture, and so on. Assuming that when we do a bigger study, the findings are replicated. So with that, I'd like to, sorry, Lenny.
No, that's really interesting. Ray, let's play off that just for a second. One, appreciate the shout out for IEX, and even though I think we have a perspective to share here, because as we've tried to expand IEX into each region, there's tons of innovation that's happening in Latin America, in Asia Pac, in Europe. And we see that in those centralized, at those events that are localized there. But bringing that awareness into the broader market is still challenging. I would even argue that perhaps Greenbook may be even best positioned to try and showcase those companies through the combination of the events and our marketing efforts. So it's actually a little sad to see that hasn't moved the needle quite as much as I would have hoped in demonstrating that there really is some very cool stuff happening in those markets. All right, just a comment.
Yeah.
And point taken on grit. So I will rope you into that for the next time.
Much appreciated. We see a similar picture, by the way. I do a lot of workshops globally around social media. And if you look at where the traffic goes, nearly all the top sites, not just the social media site, but nearly all the top sites are North American sites. And the only exceptions are the Chinese sites. The world is dividing really very much into countries that are entirely North American in where their social media goes and their internet usage goes, and those which have got a big Chinese component. And that is an interesting pattern going on. And of course, English is becoming the lingua franca of that world. And it raises some challenges, but Confirm It certainly show that you can come out of Norway and blow the game wide open. I think insights are showing that. We were talking earlier about happy thinking people out of Germany, some really interesting brands that perhaps the world is missing out on by not noticing more.
Maybe. Well, I noticed that Betty is on, Betty Adamo, and tweeting furiously, and thank you, Betty. And I think that's a great example as well. Betty has fantastic brand recognition within the UK, but not so much elsewhere in the world through social media channels, et cetera, et cetera. Tom just made the comment it was a shame that Betty only has half the followers that he does, and I would agree. So maybe that needs to be kind of a broader industry-wide effort as we identify companies that are really creating new solutions and trying to disrupt and new thinking. That as industry as a whole, we need to embrace them and help reinforce and amplify their voice across all the channels we have available to us.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Ray, I invite you to jump in on this next portion because I suspect that you're not going to agree with me on on some of these things. But I put on my amateur futurist hat, and with a fairly informed point of view, based on a few different data points, and we'll get to that at the end, thought, now what's the big movers that are coming up? And I think it's through the adoption of how the new data sources and methods deliver faster, cheaper, and better, and that's really the emphasis, holistic insights into consumers. And because we're talking about faster and cheaper, then automatically I think that means that technology is a big play there. So here's my top 5 list of things that we're really going to have the potential to disrupt the category going forward. First is big data, which is emerging now. I know some argue, Ray, I think you're one, that the track record of big data is questionable. I would actually question that. I think that big data has been incredibly effective in specific use cases, but still has a way to go to live up to its full potential. Automation and AI, the Zappy stores, the macro mills, we're seeing that we're virtually every large player in our category is launching some type of automation AI-driven solution. Nielsen, Ipsos, Kantar, they're all playing in that. So by default, simply from the level of push happening from the suppliers, we're going to see a lot of disruption occur there, particularly from a business model perspective. Non-conscious measurement, I've been a big fan of this for a while, and we know from the level of interest shown in these topics from client-side folks over and over and over and over again at events and other types of content that we put out, that although adoption may be still relatively small, interest remains incredibly high. And the barrier has primarily been one of scale and cost. It's really expensive and, quite frankly, a pain in the butt to do an EEG or fMRI study. That is changing now as a result of a variety of tools like facial scanning or sensors, biometric devices that are being incorporated into consumer electronics. And so I think non-conscious measurement, not through EEG and fMRI, but through these other technologies, is going to become very, very big over the next 2 years. Internet of Things, that is, again, just an issue of consumer adoption as more and more devices are replaced in our daily lives that now are interconnected. That data stream will simply increase, and we'll find ways to utilize that. And then finally, virtual and augmented reality. I've been talking about this. Gosh, I remember watching movies about virtual reality in the 80s and thinking how cool that was going to be. And it hadn't arrived yet, but it has arrived. And again, solely driven by the technology refinements and the amount of investment going into that. All of the major tech companies, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Sony, everybody has virtual reality offerings coming out this year or beginning of next year that will impact consumer adoption, first in gaming, secondarily in technology or in entertainment. But the bet is that virtual reality actually will become the next computing platform. That's Facebook's bet. I think that they're probably right about that. And the potential for that to change our culture, even more so than mobile and social has, is just massive. And what that does to research as a component of that will be significant as well. So those are my bets on what's coming down the pike. And
do you want to just head back onto that slide?
Yep.
Lenny?
Go back. Okay.
Go back to the timeline.
Got it.
All
right.
Just a couple of thoughts. First of all, the big agreement. Well, let's start with the big agreement. Automation. It won't be AI. It will be automation. There will be some expert systems, and it is going to be enormous. Yeah, it's going to start being enormous in the next 18 months. Surveys written by automated systems are better than 50 or 60% of the stuff that goes out at the moment. We talk about non-researchers writing bad surveys. Frankly, researchers write some terrible surveys. Talk to anybody from SSI or Research Now, and they'll have their head in their hands at the sort of things they're sent by professionals. Replace that with automation, with a lot of the analysis, a lot of the project design. Project design should be the same time and time again. And automation is going to drive some really big coach and horses through the existing employment structures, management structures, localization processes. So that would be my really big agreement. I think that the big data, Internet of Things, non-conscious measurement will all come, but I think they will take a little longer before they are of sufficient notice that somebody has to take notice of them. I think for quite a while, you can find plenty of places in the industry where you don't use those, but they will all grow. What I think we will see a lot more of are some really interesting applications which kind of link to big data in terms of the massive modeling and measurement of ROI. So companies like Game Theory, companies like Twitter, really measuring everything that people are seeing and doing and adding experimentation to that. So rather than non-conscious measurement, doing the equivalent of A/B testing, but much more complex, and working out when we change this, this happens. When we change this, this happens. and feeding that back into an automated process. So instead of doing a lot of the research as a separate world, you actually do your research in the real world by changing the levers and watching what's happening. And I think that's going to happen before some of these other things.
I totally agree. I think you and I I've always been more optimistic on timing than you have been on things, and you've probably been more right than I have in terms of timing. So I'll give you that. But totally agree with especially what you just talked about. I mean, the client side desire to get to that point of what you just described, that kind of live A/B test based on programmatic and big data, is there right now. Clients are actively looking at bringing those things to market, and there are companies responding to that. And I think that programmatic buying will be a huge piece of the solution for there. And that's where companies like Google or AOL, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, they will make the biggest plays in those categories because a big chunk of the revenue is primarily advertising. So, and that's going to be one of the core drivers. So
And,
totally
and
agree with you there.
here's a terrible thought that was given to me by somebody from Mindshare. If the best people at measuring the effectiveness of advertising are the advertising platforms like Google,
Yeah.
Facebook, and Twitter, everybody else is held hostage, frankly.
It is the fox guard and the hen house, which I think is one of the concerns. But an apology to anybody from Nielsen on the call. Is it any different than Nielsen media ratings? I would say that it's probably not. So people got pretty comfortable with that. So it will be interesting to see. And what we very well may see is maybe Google buys Nielsen. Maybe that's part of the solution. But yeah, those will be very, very disruptive things, which ultimately kind of gets me to, and we'll get to this in a minute, but I think increasingly researchers have to understand, and we saw this in the earlier slide around context, we are probably going to lose more and more of our of the focus on owning method, and instead need to focus on context. I think we must focus on becoming the keepers of the why and innovating around that versus the who, what, when, where, and how, because technology will simply take that away from us with companies with much bigger budgets and much better resources than any research company has to explore those. So I'm going to run through a few things really quickly. We mentioned AI. Ray, I actually agree with you that AI in terms of robotics, that we are years off. But basic AI exists today. Watson is an example of that. And I think as computing power increases, and down at the lower left of the screen is an example of the D-Wave, which is a quantum computer, which, Ray, you could probably explain far better than I can the difference between a quantum computer and a traditional computer. But the computing power of these new systems continue to drive the algorithms and how effective those algorithms can be that drive artificial intelligence. And there's, again, tons of money being invested here. Some of the obvious pieces are in robotics, and we certainly know that we'll see the adoption of robots. Even actually, Ray, I wonder, in Japan, since you're submarine in Japan, is there a greater use of robots in common culture, just kind of throughout the day there? Have you noticed that?
Not so much in common culture. I mean, you see a little bit of it, but I'm on chapter 9 of Learning Japanese, and robots comes into the vocabulary in only chapter 9, so it comes in pretty early. One of the fascinating things here is that you've got a massively older population. There's going to be 1 million people aged over 100 within about 25 years in Japan, which is awesome concept. Who are going to care for those people? Because there are fewer young people, probably robots. It's the country that has a need, it's got the money, and it's got the technology.
Right, hearing a lot of static. I don't know if it's coming from you or from me. Anybody else, if you've heard that, if you can just message on the platform or on Twitter, that'd be great. But anyway, just FYI, Ray, there was some disruption there. yeah, so AI, this is a dynamic force going to continue to impact all parts of society and industry, including research. Visualization, this big conglomerate of slides up here at the right, those are all free tools that are available to create data visualizations. To the right are dashboard tools. To the bottom, some that is around infographic. At the lower right was a map, also free, showing Twitter influence. And yes, Ray and I are both right there. I couldn't resist throwing that in there. But the point is that the idea to take data from a variety of sources, not just research data, and apply lots of different tools to create compelling visualizations continues to grow, and often those tools are free. The traditional research tool set of SPSS and Excel, those are the standards that we use. We actually investigated that in the new GRIT data, and we're surprised that those are still the tools that everybody uses. But when we look at the world's business intelligence or social media analytics or other related industries, these new types of visualizations are emerging as the real standards, and that's something that we as an industry are going to have to adjust to. So a little bit of latency there. Gamification, Betty, if we can unmute you, I'd bring you in here. I've been a big fan of this for years, and I think that we're seeing lots of applications of gamification that are related to research, but haven't quite gotten into the way we think about research from a quant and qual perspective. One of my favorites down at the lower left is iWire, where you're actually mapping neurons as a game. It feels like a puzzle. To the lower right, Rebecca Benkitzer launched a gamification platform used to engage consumers in developing new combinations of drugs, at least hypothetically, which they then explore and bring to market. We see gamification for training purposes, the medical piece there. We see gamification being deployed in hospitals to engage especially kids in their own self-care. So tons and tons and tons of use cases in how gamification is changing how we collect data and utilize that data to help inform and change behavior. I think the barrier for research at this point has been primarily one of scalability and cost. And of course, folks like Betty, folks like Jason Anderson, and lots of platforms outside of the industry are looking to develop scalable solutions to be able to quickly and easily develop game-based models for research. So that is certainly coming down the pike over the next few years. As we look at things like the iBeacon, the ability to intercept people in the moment and engage with them primarily from a marketing perspective, but also for research, certainly a huge play. Over to the upper right is a company called Ditto, which analyzes Instagram and other image feeds, looking for brand mentions, and then also analyzing the image itself for contextual clues about the experience. The lower right, that is UI, which is automating the analysis of video in a variety of ways. The lower left is UI. The lower right is Glimpsit, which asks consumers to take pictures that relate to their experience and analyze that utilizing some AI. So the point here is that the ability to collect data around consumer experience in highly automated ways that have really nothing to do with human interaction continues to grow, and these companies are in existence today. Biometric tools to be able to make that scalable, iris scanning, facial scanning, that's in Viso. To the lower right is shopper perception, which uses Xbox Connect systems in store to understand shopper behavior. At the top right is the VAS system from 3M, which duplicates the field of vision and heat maps where consumers would look at things. All very scalable, very inexpensive solutions that provide different levels of insight and can augment traditional research approaches. EEG and sensors. tons and tons of development happening here. Basically, if something can be created as a sensor, then it is being created as a sensor. So this impacts wearables, devices all across the board. Implants, in even to the point of having sensors embedded in. Sorry, my brain just stopped for a second. In contact lenses, just tons and tons of tools that are capturing non-conscious data, behavioral, biometric data to help augment a variety of data sets, including research. Internet of Things, we talked about that, this growing interconnectivity of everything imaginable. And here's some examples of what that looks like, from smart appliances to the Nest home control systems, smart cars, Google Glass, wearables, even sensors that are tattoos, smart clothing, just tons and tons and tons of things. And in the middle, that's a picture from the Microsoft HoloLens initiative, which is an augmented reality platform, which effectively takes Internet of Things data, runs it through a modified version of the Windows computing platform, and creates an overlay in your field of vision that you can interact with. Very cool, very science fiction-y stuff, all in play today. And again, so much, just follow the money. The investment in these categories is so huge. Not all of them certainly will win, but the general idea will, even if some of the products are maybe not live up to their potential. And then virtual reality. To the upper left is the early version of the Oculus Rift headset, which Facebook bought for $1 gazillion. There's the Sony version of the headset, the Microsoft Kinect systems, which increasingly power lots of different things. Even the Microsoft HoloLens is a variation of the Kinect technology. That particular example is how Kinect was actually used to scan somebody and create a real 3D model, which then could be printed through 3D printers. To the lower right are various examples of virtual reality experiences. Anybody has attended IEX and has done the LRW virtual reality simulation will know just how powerful this can be. If you haven't seen it, you can go to my YouTube page, and there's a video of me basically crying like a child because the experience was so visceral and so authentic in being placed in the scenario. So again, just consumer adoption will drive the adoption of these technologies in research. And then 3D printing. Now, I can't come up with any great examples of 3D printing in research, but I think that the opportunity to do this for rapid co-creation, rapid prototyping, within qualitative research, within sensory testing, this will be disruptive in terms of cost and speed. 3D printers are coming down in price significantly. You can buy some now entry level right at $150. And they are being used to do some amazing things. Now, I don't know if I would line up to eat 3D printed food, but it is happening. To 3D print toys would be pretty darn cool. They are 3D printing organs and replacement body parts at this point. So this technology will change both manufacturing on the client side and consumers dramatically. And since research often has manufacturers as our clients, and then certainly is playing or wants to understand consumers, then these technologies will come into play in our toolkit as well. And do we think this is science fiction or science fact? Well, it is science fact. So I just went through just a couple companies that were participating in next week's IAX and categorized them in these big buckets. And there's a lot of companies that are right now in market, fairly mature, with solutions in all of these technologies, and big data, Dakota. We've got some folks from Johns Hopkins University coming to the event that literally wrote the big data code to take all of the Hubble telescope data, and they're the ones who take all these trillions and trillions of data points of small pictures and bring them together into creating the holistic images that we've all seen. That is a big data kind of filtering platform, which has lots of applications in research. Steve Cohen from Information Insights, the AI automation, Zappy Store, Knowledge Hound, Answer Rocket, Gamification, Data Game, Upfront Analytics, EC Labs. Again, Betty, wish you could be there. I'm not going to read all of these. Just the point is that these things are not science fiction. So there are companies certainly outside the research space that are driving all of these, and there are a lot of companies inside our category today that are utilizing various aspects of these technologies to solve research business issues, even 3D printing. Insights Meta threw their hat in the ring for the DIVA Awards, or Data Visualization Awards, and it was the coolest thing ever, pretty gimmicky, but they 3D printed charts. I just thought that was just brilliant. Who wouldn't think that was a cool thing to have charts that you could play with in a meeting? I think that's just neat. Is that something that's going to change the world? Probably not. But the point is people are getting really creative in utilizing all of these technologies. So as an industry, we have to engage these, because if there's going to be disruption, it's going to come through these applications of technology, not the things that we are currently working on. So, Ray, I think I am spent.